The Sporland division of Parker Hannifin proudly sponsors the Advanced Refrigeration podcast. There are a lot of questions surrounding the transition to A2L refrigerants and a lot of talking heads disseminating nebulous answers. But when your technician is face-to-face with the first A2L transition project, where do you turn for real-world answers about this specific job? Parker Sporland's Virtual Engineer is an innovative online design tool to size and select the correct components for climate control and refrigeration applications. Get your A2L system flow and component selection answers in 3 simple steps. Enter your application details, size, and select products, then download your project files. It's that easy. Try it at absolutely no cost. Visit sporlin.com and navigate to the Resource Center. Parker Sporland, leading the charge.
About $9 now.
Yeah, because it's supposed to be free. Don't tell me it's a free screen replacement and it's not free.
It is free. They're just charging you for the
$9 to ship. $9 to ship a cell phone screen. Come on.
Tariffs, inflation.
Yeah, tariffs and inflation. More like USPS is screwing everybody like they always do.
And then lose your stuff. By the way, did they ever find your stuff that they lost?
Oh yeah, like it showed up 5 days after it was supposed to. Classic USPS. Like
who ships stuff USPS?
UPS.
Who doesn't use FedEx or UPS? Like something that's actually reliable.
USPS or the post office is awful.
Yeah, no, it is. It's ran by the government. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Advanced Refrigeration Podcast. You're the host, Brett Wetzel and Kevin Compass. How was your week so far? How was Florida?
Hot and steamy, and I saw what I could describe as methahanus, some lady feeding a 3-legged raccoon on a park bench with a bunch of feral cats and a bunch of crows around her. I was like, what in the
Jesus.
Yeah, I was like, wow, this is real Florida shit right here.
What part of Florida were you in? Lantana.
What? Yeah, it's somewhere, I think, by Miami.
Lantana.
Yeah. It's nice.
Yeah. College town?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Beach town. But yeah, and then the flight back was absolutely horrendous. I booked it last minute, and then it ended up being like 9,000 old people on there. So the plane took off late because it was American Airlines, like Brett always flies. And I talked to him before I took off, and I broke what I normally never do because he's just cursed luck. And so, yeah. And then I got stuck on there. It took 38 minutes to deboard a plane because it was full of old people.
So there's 20 people with chairs sitting up front.
And I'm just like convinced that old people should just sit down and let all the young people go before them because they already get to live their lives.
It's so awful.
It's awful, but I want to get off a plane.
This is what we call intrusive thoughts.
Yeah. So that was my trip to Florida. And it was ridiculously expensive because I'm pretty sure the F1 race is there this weekend. So I'm glad I got out of there.
Yeah, you showed me what you were going to pay for a hotel, and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, the next day it was like, it went from $200 to $500. I'm like, holy shit.
People like, what's Formula One? It's a little bit different.
I don't know. There was yachts everywhere and fancy things. And I was like, I got to get out of here. This is going to get real expensive to get out of here. So yeah, now I'm back home. And today I was cleaning up some Danfoss programming when the Danfoss controller decided to freeze right in the middle of me changing how many circuits it had. And I went to go from 10 to 14 and it decided to make it 4 and it deleted everything, which was very sad.
Did Yoder have an answer for that? What happened?
It just froze. It's just Danfoss doing Danfoss things.
You give me a headache when you say stuff like that.
What?
Either that or I'm having a stroke right now. I'm not sure.
Maybe you're having a stroke.
That'd be
You
great.
should be used to it by now. It's just Danfoss doing Danfoss things.
Gotcha. I have been making my hands softer all week. I've just been making a whole bunch of training because this is like the first week that I've been home in a while. So I'm literally making some training for some Texas supermarkets, and then I'm doing some stuff for going up to Idaho in another couple weeks. So we're doing screw racks and CO2.
People live in Idaho?
They do, which is odd. But
I always forget that's a state, to be honest to you.
They have potatoes.
Yeah, it's just there.
It's like the United States version of Scotland, I guess.
The United States version of Ireland.
Yeah, Ireland. Yeah, sorry. What do we have? We have potatoes.
All right, so what are we talking about tonight?
I don't know. I guess we'll do some like basic defrost stuff, and then we'll get into frosting on things. I don't know. It depends how far we get in.
I had a good one actually earlier. At the end of the day, I got sent to go look at a single unit.
Oh.
From 1997 that we had put some new cases on, and somebody re-engineered this thing, and it's had a retrofit, and it made it through winter okay, no problems really. And first hot day, shit condenser, and this thing goes through a defrost, and it overloads, trips off on the overload.
On amperage?
Yes.
Oh, on the compressor.
Post defrost.
Okay. Too high amps.
So they go push every button on the oil reset. They have no idea what they pushed. They're just like jamming just random buttons on compressors and don't even know what compressor even controls this thing. But they're just in there pushing everything. So they don't know what they pushed. So I get in there, I look at it, and I get it fired. It's running when I get there, and I throw it through a defrost, and I'm watching it. It's like 40 pounds of suction pressure goes to start up. And it's taking forever. So hot. And it's like 60 out today.
Cooler or freezer?
Glass doors.
Freezer.
Yeah.
Oh.
No CPR.
Oh.
No MOP power heads.
Where's the liquid line solenoid?
No liquid line solenoid.
What?
Old school. Cycles a contactor.
Ooh, that's even ballsier.
It's in the mechanical room. So pretty far run. So likelihood of floodback is lower. Floodback could probably help this thing a little bit.
Yeah.
So what I ended up finding is they overloaded it. So it's obviously lost some efficiency in the 20 years it's ran.
Yeah.
So the numbers came out. They should have had another 2,000 BTUs. Obviously, it doesn't have. So it's a little bit inefficient. So looking at it, and then it needs MOP power heads.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. They're going to have to put MOP power heads on it because post-defrost, when the head pressure is high, it can't handle it.
So that's the deciding factor. So what he's referring to is that there's a pressure limiting power head, and that pressure limiting power head, it's not adjustable. So like you'll see like an RZP-P for pressure limiting, and then it'll have a number after it. Like I know the 404 one has a pressure limiting of 40. And I only know that because of an instance that I had similar to that.
Yeah, I think the 448 22 one's lower, like 25-ish, maybe 20,
maybe something like that.
I don't remember, but yeah, so it restricts the valve from opening wide up post defrost when the coil's warm. So A, it doesn't flood back, and B, it doesn't overload the compressor because you don't have a CPR valve. So this doesn't have a CPR valve, and it really wasn't a problem in the summertime, just from the fact that it had low head pressure. Now it's 60 out, and we have 60-year-old belt drive condensers, and they just can't cut it. So when it's running like 220 pounds a head, when it's right now, it's causing issues and causing it to overamp.
EZP. No, it's actually 40. It's still 40 pounds. It's still 40 pounds. I just looked it up right now. So yeah, so here's all the power heads, right? So low temp, VZP 40 for R22 and D, which is the 448 and 449, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Because now they're designating a special power head. It used to be that you just use R22 power head, 407 power head, whatever. You know what I mean?
I thought it's the same thing still, though. They just changed
Yeah,
it.
I don't like. Why would you designate it something different if it is, in fact, not different, though?
I thought they told us it was the same. I don't remember.
I don't remember. We gotta ask. I'll ask again because I don't remember. But yeah, I had a similar situation where it did the same thing. It was a coffin case, and after it went through a defrost, and like we didn't ask, we just were told to go out and change the compressor. So we went there, and a couple days later, it went off on high amperage again. I'm like, that's weird, because we didn't know why the compressor failed. It was another contractor. Same thing. The amperage was just way high, and it was cool because it went down to about 42 psi, and then at that point, the pressure was good enough that it wasn't overamping the system. That, and we moved the solenoid down to the case because they had it up at the condensing unit, and it was a very long line set. Very small receiver. Yeah. So it got hokey for a little bit. So I was like, let's just help this out a little bit. Like you saw, man, it just jammed whatever. It was a teeny receiver. It was technical.
I'm sure that condenser coil appreciated the hell out of that.
Also the compressor, because they're like, yeah, we lost the compressor like 4 times. I was like, that would have been really nice to know before we just quoted it and be like, yeah, we're going to change out the compressor. And then all of a sudden, surprise, this is why.
Every time we do blind compressor quotes, it's like, gotcha.
Maybe I should have figured in another 3 hours of diagnostic in that quote. Like, how come she didn't get it done?
Let's riff on some walk-in iced up.
Sure. Well, so I guess first we'll go through sequence of operation and such. So
this is the defrost time clock, the scariest thing to an electrician.
They don't really like them, do they?
And or new tech.
Yeah, and that's the thing. These things, as long as you have the model number. So this one is an 8145-20.
Which is the most common clock you're going to see.
100%.
Like every 208 condensing unit, like at restaurants and everything else, this is the clock. It's been the same clock for the last 40 years, probably. So, reliable clock. These are simple. These are as simple as you can get. So, what you have on the backside, you have a motor. Okay, that motor gets powered off of L1 and N on the 814520. Some of them change N and X around.
Yeah, I don't know why they do that. It's a specific number. I had a guy call me up when I was over in Connecticut. He's like, Fred, I changed this out, apples for apples. And he's, hey, man, the terminal strip is glowing orange. I was like, chances are you probably didn't change it out apples for apples then. And that's what it was. It was a different model number. Apples for pears. So basically what was happening is he had a direct short because X wasn't X now. X was actually neutral. And
he had some no blows.
It was a long time ago. It was when I was in the Northeast, so I don't know.
Definitely 100%. Some no blows somewhere.
No blows, yeah.
So on this clock, you on the backside, you have a motor. Okay, if you ever are like curious and like you don't understand what the wiring is, flipping these clocks over is the easiest way to look at this. On the backside of this clock, you see where the contacts are, where the motor lands. So you're going to have one on 1 or 2. There's a jumper bar in between. So not
always.
You could split that. You could split it. So 1 and 2 are jumped here. Now, what they're doing is that's powering the clock. It needs to be powered all the time. That clock is going to rotate a bunch of gears in there, which is going to turn this dial. Now you have 2 dials in the front. You have a dial in 24 hours with half-hour increments in between. Okay. You have your small dial, which sets your defrost time increments.
By this little pin right here.
Yes. You push the pin down and you could move it around the gear to set it. So whatever you're going to set it at. And then there's little holes drilled in there where these trip pins go in. So you can see where it says defrost time on Brett's diagram. That's a trip pin. So it has to be screwed in all the way, and it has to be screwed in straight. So
they do make ones that are odd and even, by the way. So if you get one where you have to have 2 going in at the same exact time, you'll see that these are all on the even ones. They do make another version where they're just on the odd hour, by the way.
I never knew that.
Oh, they do. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, so you have the trip pins in there. Those trip pins, what they do is when it goes around, it causes the like plastic bar in the back of this to shift. So it causes it to shift, and then the contacts on the back side of the clock are attached to a bar. When that causes it to shift, it shifts the other way. So the normally closed becomes normally open now switches and it is closed. So it opens the normally closed and switches the normally open on.
There's two little plastic pieces right here on the slide. One right here and one right here. When this thing switches around, when the pin actually hits that, it will actually engage this and lock it in, right? Until we either go off, typically off of time, because we can set it for time. We can also set it for temperature. Typically that's when you have your defrost termination clicks on. And what it'll do is once that engages, there's a little lever that's connected right to this pin here. And just like any coil, when you apply power to it, the coil of copper becomes magnetized. It pulls this up and then lets this return back to its normal state. And so
Correct.
3 is normally open and 4 is normally closed. 4 is where we put our evaporator fans, our thermostats for our cold temperature, liquid line solenoid, all the stuff that we want running all the time. Defrost heater is typically going to be on 3. We can use this as well as for pressure control in the olden days. The only difference is we'd have to you have to use a pressure switch for defrost rather than an actual temperature control.
Now, also on these clocks, you can do just straight defrost off of this clock, meaning like you could have the defrost heaters hooked right to 3. Now, it depends on the amperage. On bigger coils and other stuff where you may need 3-phase power or whatnot, you may have to run a pilot solenoid, or I'm sorry, a pilot relay or a pilot contactor. So this may be controlling the device directly, or it may be controlling it through a pilot relay or contactor. Now, if you look at the back of this is where it gets everybody on the back side of this clock. If you look, there's a term solenoid. So what this term solenoid does is when your defrost 3-way clicks on, pressure switch, whatever you're using to shut the defrost off, to say, okay, I'm defrosted. Whenever that closes and sends power to X or in, whichever clock version you have, so it's going to apply your line voltage to that term solenoid. What that term solenoid is going to do is it's going to shoot out that actuator piston, and it's going to cause that to shift back into the refrigeration mode.
Yeah, if you look where it's wired, it's actually on this terminal, but if you flip this around, basically it gets one side of power from defrost. So this thing can never activate unless we are physically in defrost. And then
Correct.
If you look, basically the common side is then on the X terminal. So like I said, the only way that you'll ever get power to this thing right here is essentially if you actually have it in defrost, because otherwise that one, yes, you will get it on the X side, but you won't get it on the pin number 3. Basically, if you flip this around, all we did is just literally go like this.
So this is my number one thing with troubleshooting clocks. When I don't touch them, as soon as I get there and I think there's a clock issue or it's iced up, I do not put my fingers on the clock. I take a marker, I put a tiny little dot right next to where the current time is. That little marker, I put a little dot there. I come back in like 10 or 15 minutes and make sure that clock moved. Okay? Because here's the thing. There's a lot of little gears in here, guys. And there's brass gears and shear pins, and it's a mechanical device. They break. They chip. They get stuck sometimes. So what a lot of new guys will do is they'll get there, it's iced up, it's reading 5 o'clock, whatever. They grab the timer, they spin it to defrost, the defrost works, they check it, it kicks out of defrost on time. They're like, yeah, clock works, they're good. Gets to that 24 hours later, it gets right to that time again, it stops because it's got a broken gear and it doesn't move any farther. I've seen so many guys get recalls by doing just that. I don't turn that clock until I see it move.
or the motor's actually weak, where it's not just a gear missing at one different section. It's basically just doesn't have enough power. So after, what you said as far as watching it go, that's fine. But usually I'll turn it like literally right before it's going to have to engage its defrost on its own, and then just watch it, see if it can actually do it on its own. Because a lot of times it'll get locked up and just stop there, and then it gets iced up like crazy.
Correct. And the other thing is sometimes, like when it's a clock situation like that, it may take 24 hours. So always put the clock back to the correct time. So that way, if you go there and you put it at 6 p.m. and you have it at 6 p.m. and you come back the next day and it's at 3 p.m., something happened, the motor overheated, it stopped at some point, started again. So the clocks get replaced. So that's one thing just to be aware of. Now, when you're going to term, when you go to spin the clock and it kicks into defrost and kicks right out, it's terminating right away. You may not be able to catch it with your meter when it's happening because it's so instant. So you may have to hold your meter on N and X and twist the clock, and it may have to put your meter on inrush current, inrush voltage to see it because it's quick. It kicks out right away. And if that's the case, just pull X off the clock and then let it defrost and then do your thing.
Agreed. So the other thing that you might see is sure. The other thing you might see is the digital clock version of this, where it has this pretty little clock. The fact that you can only set it in 15-minute increments, so make sure you have some sort of what else are you gonna do though, unless you have something that's digital, but digital stuff
it's
not as
better.
much abuse. Yeah, okay. So on this one, we have all the same terminals, except for we have an extra terminal for fans. So just follow the schematic of what you got going on. Because sometimes you're gonna use that, sometimes you won't.
One thing with these clocks, the Grosslins, you're gonna want to use pilot solenoid or pilot relays because they will catch on fire.
Depends on what the amperage is. If it's low amperage,
they will catch on fire.
Nice, stop it.
And then also, the other cool thing is with these ones, if you are using like something small, you could actually pull the screws off the back of the clock and pull the clock off. And there's terminals on the back that you could put spade terminals on, and you could use that clock. It's just a random clock.
Yeah, they sell Groslin sells a version of this where it's just literally just the round clock with contacts.
You could just pull it off. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Today's episode is sponsored by the RefriShield RDP Series differential pressure monitors from Westermeyer Industries, now available for transcritical CO2 systems in addition to other common pressures and refrigerants. When the filter element of your coalescing oil separator is contaminated, it can hurt your system's performance and efficiency. But how do you know when it's time to replace that filter? Wait too long to replace, and you could end up with a nasty filter blowout. But replacing too often can be a waste of time and money. The answer is installing a differential pressure monitor. The RDP Series differential pressure monitors, including the new transcritical CO2 model, are available now from Westermeyer Industries. To find out more information, email sales@westermeyerin.com. That's WESTERMEYERIN.com.
You could just pull it off. They do have an LED on there. The relays are a little beefed up, but they don't take as much abuse as a Paragon does.
Mm-hmm. So just to show you on the schematic, when this thing goes into defrost, it's going to switch from, usually this would be the normally closed set of contacts. And so when it does go into defrost, it's basically switching out where it's going to open that set of contacts. Exactly what we were showing you up above here with physically the behind it, right? So right now, this is the normally closed set of contacts. This is the normally open. That would be number 3. This would be number 4. So when it does go, that slide's going to go over and essentially do this to the schematic. So this is what it looks like normally. And then when it does go into defrost, and you can see what I did was there, I basically marked out timer motor, solenoid. If you ever see it on a schematic here, if you ever see a whole bunch of dashed lines, that means that component is essentially that means it's all encompassed in the control itself. If you have dash lines going out from there, then yes. When you see a box around something, so if you see a box around like an oil fill switch, you have a box around a demand cooling control, that means that everything is encompassed within this control. So I've had guys look for, they're like, where's the timer motor? I said, it's on the time clock. And so they're like, but it's on the schematic. I said, I understand that, but anything with dash lines around the actual component itself basically means that this is all enclosed within there, right? Like I said, so 2 and 4 is where you're gonna have the closed set of contacts. 3, you see how you have the bar right here. In between 1, 2, and 3, basically you have an open set of contacts here. So when it does go into defrost, we'll essentially then open up the lot between 2 and 4, and then close off for 3. And so that's how it'll actually put it in defrost. Right here is typically your defrost contactor coming off of 3. You can also have a defrost high limit as well. You'll have your evaporator fan motors and your liquid line solenoid and your thermostat connected to number 4, shown here. And then off of the X, you will have a bunch of different stuff actually hooked up. So your evaporator fans usually hook up to your clicks on the black lead. On the red lead, that'll be your common back to L2, or back lead, basically going back to your neutral. And then your black of your clicks on would go over to the X. So you can see as the temperature goes low, because this is the universal signal for thermostat. As that temperature goes low, it's going to close a set of contacts between black and red, powering up your evaporator fan motors. And then when this is in defrost heater is going to warm up that same clicks on, essentially warm up. This is going to close on a rise then between black and red, and then that's where it'll send the voltage back through X, through the solenoid to engage the defrost clock to kick back out.
But make sure you actually check it, because I had some, don't just rely on the colors, because I had one the other day where the colors were backwards.
Yeah, I wish we could standardize that, right?
You would think it would be, but I had one the other day that I'm looking at it and I was pulling my hair out and I'm like, what is going on? This should be working? And it was backwards.
So what's crazy about this, a lot of times people don't think about this. They think about the component it's either working or it's not. And if anyone here has done any kind of controls troubleshooting, let's just say you have a blown out contactor on your compressor, or you have blown out fan motors for some odd reason, all of a sudden all of them took a crap. Make sure that any of your controls that are in the circuit do not essentially have any kind of weird resistances. It's either going to be closed or it's going to be infinitely open. And if it is closed, you're going to have 0.1, 0.2 ohms. You have anything greater than an ohm or 2, chances are when you get power rolling through there, it's going to drop voltage across the set of contacts that are in here, and then in turn drop less voltage to whatever device that we're trying to give power to, whether it be a defrost contactor, a refrigeration solenoid, whatever, because these terminals will get pitted up with carbon and stuff from making for years.
Correct. They fail constantly.
Yeah, I'd rather a digital control all day long.
Oh, 100%, which I want to talk about next. Is I have been for a long time is when I have every chance, I switched out to digital control, meaning like a little Dixel, the Universal XR75 CXs or whatever they are, and then or 65s or Corel or Danfoss. Personally, Danfoss or Dixel's the way to go.
Yeah, so I just want to show you this real quick, so you can check some of this stuff without even having power. You can do it without having power applied, but how I'm doing it here, so I'm checking between 1 and 3, right, to ensure that I don't have any kind of drop across this now closed set of contacts, because you're constantly turning these things off or on. You get arcing. Arcing creates carbon, will create resistance, and then essentially you'll get some kind of weird voltage drop across there. So in this instance, I'm checking between 1 and 3 to make sure that my contact is essentially closing off the way it should. Then go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, let me
go ahead. Damn it, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. And so now I'm checking between 3 and 3 across the defrost contactor over to that side. And I'm getting 115, which shows me I'm dropping some kind of voltage, because in this case, the control circuit that I'm doing is 230. And then if I go down a little bit farther, then I'm checking what's open at this point. And so at this point, it's the overload for the actual coil for the defrost heaters. Typically, you'll see that in Heatcraft coils, it'll be a yellow and white terminal or wires coming off the overload. Sorry, you were going to say?
Okay, so this is the perfect picture with this. Go back. So using your meter, guys, I've seen tons of new guys that we've had that are just absolutely struggling troubleshooting with a meter.
Go to ground.
Going to ground pisses me off more than anything in the entire world. And it's extremely frustrating because it puts guys down a rabbit hole. Because with 115 volts, yeah, okay, whatever, fine, it'll get you close. But when you're dealing with 208 or anything else or stuff on a transformer, it becomes a nightmare. So what you want to do is park one of your meter leads on L2. Whatever is going to all the devices, meaning like uninterrupted power to the devices. So whether it be L2 and it's going to all the contactors, whatever, I park one meter lead there and I start from the beginning on the other L1 and I just walk down the path. It's just hopscotching. You go from component to component in the row. You start at L1. You verify you got power from L1 to L2. You go to terminal 1. Verify you got power from 1 to L2. You should have 208 there. You know, that should tell you your timer motor should have power. It should be spinning.
And here's the thing. If you then jump over to here,
you should have 0.
You should have 0 because remember, a meter measures the difference in potential, right? So technically we are on the same piece of wire right now. If you look at L2 over to neutral, we are on the same damn piece of wire. So whether you measure right on top of it, there is no difference in potential.
Yeah,
so
if you measure 208 on the inside, when you move that meter lead over there, you got a problem.
We have an open somewhere in here.
You have an open wire somewhere.
Yep.
So you're measuring a differential. You should have none. So I just keep going on down. Then I'll go to 2, make sure I have power. And then if it's not in defrost, it should have power to the normally closed of 4.
Yeah, so if we were to move this down here and essentially measure from L2 to 2, this is the same thing as being on L1. So we should have 208 at this point.
And then moving to 4, you should have 208. If you don't have 208 and it's in refrigeration mode, you have a problem. You either got a broken contact, bad contact, you know, something's wrong with the clock. The clock at that point is SOL.
And then if we measure over to, once again, going to black, if this line right here was closed, if the coil was cold and we were getting, let's just say 5 volts, that's telling you already, remember, we're not going to, it's the difference in potential, which means it's only going to give you a voltage drop if you have some sort of resistance, right? So if you have some sort of voltage other than 0 on this, that's telling you that this component right here is not making a full closure, giving you an actual voltage drop. And that's what I was just talking about before, right? Same thing down here, going down to the inlet of the liquid line solenoid. You should have 208. Once again, over here, this is just a piece of wire, this switch right here. So for all intents and purposes, I should have 0 and 0 going all the way across. But this goes for anything. This goes for control circuits on compressors. A lot of times I'll park, because what control has a comment on it all the time? The oil control. So you put your meter lead on the oil control common and then just hopscotch around. And then
hold up here. Be careful with that, though. Make sure that if you look at the wiring diagram and there's not a current sensing relay.
Okay, fair enough.
That one got me the other day.
Did it really?
Yeah, oh yeah. I looked up and went, oh shit. Of course, it was the only compressor in the rack with one.
Nice. But yeah, and sometimes you'll have different controls. It won't just be cut and dry. So if we look at, here, let's look at this schematic, or this one right here. So it's weird because you have a 3-pole switch right here. So you have probably defrost termination, your fan delay, and then your common. But then you have this little pretty one up here doing God knows what. But I'd guess would probably be your limit for your heaters if I had to guess. Because that would be at the top, right? It would make sense.
A Russell coil. That's usually what they do. Yeah, it makes complete sense. So with that, I'm a big proponent of using a alligator clip style leads. So what I do is I get the fluke that almost 4 inches long. You got to put 2 fingers there and pull back, and it releases the jaws. I usually put those on L2, and it gets a pretty good grip.
So you can do the hopscotch method back and forth.
Do the hopscotch. That is my complete method on troubleshooting electrical. And then 6-foot meter leads, 2 of them, that gives you 12 foot of reach. You put it in the middle. And then the same thing like Brett said, usually the oil control or the compressor protection module have a common there.
Yeah. So if you look at this one right here, so you can see right down here, here's your overload, your defrost temperature overload protection. And then right here, you have brown, black, and red going to your Aramco control. This is actually one of my favorite controls for defrost termination and fan control, depending on where you have it. It looks like they're using this for both. I'm okay with that unless we're doing electric or hot gas defrost. And then I got another different spot that I'm going to put it. But as you can see, it's still a 3-pole switch, still 3 wires going to it. And they're a lot more accurate than the mechanical non-adjustables. Going through reading some of the part numbers, you got to look at the numbers because sometimes it'll have an L on there. It'll be like, I forget what the actual thing is. It's L, and then that L number would essentially be the limit number, which is when it opens up. So it'd be like a limit 55 and then dash something else, which would be the number at which it closes.
I just have a bunch of Supco ones in my van. So I have, there's 3 or 4 each one that for coil mount ones, and there's 3 or 4 of each one for the clip pipe mount ones. And I carry those in my van and pretty much covers anything I need to do with the Clixon, minus the zero zone ones that like are goofy.
So I have a question for you. So this I don't agree with. I hate this. I hate the fact they even do this because this causes a lot of like stalactites and stalagmites of ice in the walk-in coils because it's measuring the aluminum, right?
Yes.
Who cares what the aluminum is? We really care on what the coil is. On this one, we've talked about this before, but we're going to talk about it again because this is something that just happens frequently. So they're using this as the defrost termination and fan delay. This is the heater safety, pan heater, terminal board. All right, cut and dry. There's another thing. They'll use like an awesome Aramco control, but then once again, look, they even have a little mount for a CPC
So
sensor.
irritating.
It's the dumbest thing in the freaking world.
I rip those out every time and mount them to the face of the coil, like second or third fan in, on the TXV side, like that. Except I use stainless zip ties.
These are the mounts that actually come with it. Either that or I've in a pinch I've used 14 gauge wire and basically stripped it off and used it like a bread tie. The reason why this is a really good location, you don't want to go all the way to the tippy top. You can see all the way at the top here. We're close to the brim here. The reason why is because the other defrost heater is probably going to be just about right about here. We want to make sure we're not directly in front of the defrost heater. So the defrost heater obviously is going to be on the back of this, but we want to be on the front. Like he had said, we want to be towards the fan. Okay, so it might take some remounting in order to do this. But then at least if you're on one of these, the first passes of the distributor, like the distributor usually will enter right in the front. The reason why it's a great thing, because it doesn't matter if the unit has low superheat or high superheat, it doesn't matter. This is still going to be the coldest part of the coil all the time, regardless if it's low charge or flooding back. It's still going to be the coldest part of the freaking coil.
Correct. And it's going to make sure it gets a good, thorough defrost. And at the same time, it's going to make sure that it doesn't cause it to over defrost. And this also helps keep the ice off the blades. And it's not just so much a delay on defrost to get ice on the blades. It's also a over defrosting, and it causes condensation to get on the blades. And then after a while that builds up, and then the blades are out of balance and explode.
Yeah, either that or on some of your bigger walk-ins, your big crack coils, depending on what kind of motor mount you have. Usually if you have a regular rectangle piece of iron or piece of steel that's going across, you know, when you have that vibration going on, it looks like a car tire that's out of balance. Because we talked about this before, the oh my God, I can't think of words. The paddle for the one fan blade will sit down wherever it is, right? And so if you have condensation on there, it's going to build up with more frost, more moisture, more ice. And then when it goes back into a defrost the second time, that's also going to come down because now it's the heaviest and it just keeps building up and building up. And I've seen coils where you can have a 2 5/8 or 2-in-1 takeoff off the suction where it's welded into the actual suction manifold on that coil. and it'll crack it. It'll break it from vibration. I've seen liquid lines just freaking jet and break, and it has to do with the vibration. I was at a Costco where it was like just shearing off distributor tubes like crazy. So before you knew it, like it would always happen during hot gas defrost, and before you knew it, you're like, oh, I need 600 pounds of 507A.
Yeah, we had a Sam's where they were shearing off distributor tubes every week because they would leave the doors open, coils of frost over. They would shake that bad, rip the whole fronts of coils out.
The crack coils, so it's funny. So we had crack coils in this one Costco, and it had the spider to hold the motor mount in, and we broke motor mounts all the time. Then we did the remodel where you had to do the live remodel where you work on one half of the box and then you work on the other half. And when we did that, now all of a sudden these keep right coils were just shearing off the distributors. I think I've told this story before. I was telling someone this at one of the bigger clubs, and we were talking about what happens with the vibration stuff. I tell him to go get the manager. I go in the walk-in and see if I can show him like where I'm going to point out stuff. And all of a sudden I started feeling real weird, real lightheaded. And I walked out and I almost slumped in the walk-in and then sat down outside the box. He came back and he's, Brett, what's wrong? I was like, man, I don't feel good. There's a leak in there. We just looked at everything. I said, I know. By the time that he got the manager and by the time we walked out to the back, we went from 35 receiver level to nothing. It literally broke a 7/8 liquid line and just sheared it off from the vibration. So it literally just happened.
Yeah, it'll do that. I seen one split the welded 90 in half where they miter it. I seen it rip it right off.
It cracks.
I mean, it didn't even crack, dude. It ripped it like clean off. Yeah. Like it pulled it. So that's why like defrost termination and fan delays are super important with this. And then also door switches and door alarms. You want to stop icing issues? Throw a door alarm on there. Those EMC door alarms are the best trainers for a store.
Close the door. Close the door. Close the door.
And also, you could turn the volume up on those things. The ones at Target, the volume is turned down. You could make them louder.
So I have a question for you. A lot of times the mechanical click-ons that are non-adjustable, right? They turn the fans on typically at 28 degrees. I like turning them on. If I'm in a freezer, I won't turn on that thing.
25.
Man, I won't turn that thing on until it hits 15. You know, if I know it's a ice cream freezer, 15 degrees, because then that way it allows the whole coil to get frosted all the way through and through.
See, I don't like the Ranco controls, though. I think it's a pain to get them to adjust. Like, I'm more of a Johnson Controls one.
Same control, just different.
I'm more of a pen. It's the inner boomer in me.
I'll agree with that.
I think they work a little bit better for stuff. And then if you're using hot gas, guys, and you're using a fan, you're using a thermostat for the fans, put it on the suction line. Don't put it on the face of the coil.
Yes, for fan control. Because there is going to be a different terminator. There's going to be a different. You're not going to use that on hot gas. You're not going to use the same control for an input for defrost termination. That's going to be somewhere else.
Yes, you're going to want for the fans though. You're going to want that on the suction line. What's going to turn the fans and what's going to turn your heater on in the pan if you have it. You want to place that in the suction line. So as soon as that coil gets warm, it shuts off the fans, and then it brings the heater on in the pan, and it does all that. And then your termination is obviously going to be on your dump line for the hot gas. So you're going to have two different controls there. You're not going to be using the 3-wire for this.
If you do have the big pistol grip style where it's still a 2-pipe system, but it doesn't have a pan heater, it has a separate path from the hot gas line. Make sure you put the hot gas like before that first check valve. So then that way it's catching that heat, because you might have already a whole bunch of ice in the pan from past things going on. And that hot coil, that's sitting in the bottom, once it burns off all that ice around it, you basically now have a hot coil, and then you insulation of air hitting the hot gas. So that temperature might stay cold for a while. So try to hit the fans off right before you actually hit that main check valve. Unfortunately, I don't think I have any of that stuff that I can show. Let me look real quick. I might have something. Move. I don't want you yelling at me that you're all ADHD because I can't find it. But also also with some of this stuff, it's playing around with some of the set points and see what actually works the
Yeah.
best.
Sometimes you may need a little bit less termination. Sometimes you may need a little bit more, depending on what it is. And then if you're dealing with condensation issues in like small walk-ins and they're like single systems, a door switch does wonders sometimes, especially if you have somebody, that's leaving a door open constantly. You may need to shut the fans and look like solenoid off and just let it pump down, let it get a little warm, let it shut off and not continue to run, and do that. KE2s with demand defrost are nice with stuff like that, but I'm not a huge proponent of demand defrost. Like, I think it causes more problems than it's worth. I mean,
Wait, for what? Say it again.
Like demand defrost in like a supermarket application. I definitely think causes more problems.
Unless you're in Arizona.
Yeah, it just does. It has its place. It doesn't. Its place isn't everywhere. On single systems, yeah, it probably does pretty good, and it does a fine job of doing it. But like on racks, I think there's much better ways of doing it without having the demand defrost.
I agree with that. I got one more place to look. I might be able to find this today.
Demand defrost works great if you're at a Walmart and they have a OGP using the freezer and it's open like every 35 seconds. But then the freezer's in defrost every 35 seconds. The coil splitter.
So the places that I've seen the piping that we were talking about was, there we go. I think I found it. Almost there. It's one of these. Oh, there we go. Perfect. I found it. Yay, me. At stage. So you have the piping of its reverse where it's going down the suction line. We'll go around here, go in the pan, go out of the pan, goes through this check valve, goes back in the suction line, and then back up through the header, through the tubies, and then comes out of the tubies around the bypass, around the expansion valve, and then right back to, through the line here. Yeah, back up through here, back up through there, and then where am I missing it? And then heading right back up the liquid line. Yeah.
Yeah, not a big fan of hot gas pans. They are not the best. They don't perform as well as an electric heater, that's for sure.
I agree with that. One of the people think that you can just juice it on and it'll just be fine if that pan is a big block of ice.
No.
That's what I was talking about before. A lot of times if you have one and you've melted out as much ice as you can with the defrost. So like I said, you'll have the copper, which essentially is touching the ice, right? But once you get that air gap between there, air is an insulator. So one of the best things you can do, I've seen in industrial, we used to just cover the back and cover the front with a tarp and then clog up the drain. And then whatever water is essentially then created gets warm and then continues just to cook and just warm up the water. And so it finally defrosts that whole pan.
So I am a big proponent. I can't stand hot gas defrost coils in walk-ins. Like, I will take electric defrost any day.
Why?
Because if that coil ices up, the hot gas generally is not going to melt it out. It's a solid ice up.
You're talking about the pan?
Pan and or coil. But electric defrost, I could lock that thing on for 2 or 3 hours and it'll bake.
See, in industrial, that's what I'm saying. In industrial, where you can have how many different coils on at the same time? Yeah, but where you're limited, where you can't lock on hot gas defrost for X amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think in bigger coils, electric's the way to go, just for the fact that you could bake it in pan heat, definitely. Because I'll get the pan nice and warm, and I will take a rubber mallet and smack the bottom of the pan and drop the pan and get all the ice out. If you do that with a hot gas coil and it's got the hot gas pan, probably going to start leaking. Not good. But, like, smacking the bottom of the pan works great.
Ooh.
Let's do a part 2.
Oh, don't say that. Every time we say that, nothing happens. And then we're like, what are we going to do?
Next week, we'll remember to do a part 2.
On what? We covered it. What else do you want to cover?
I don't know. Part 2.
You can't. I hate you. Because I'm going to have to go back and be like, you said something about part 2. I'm going to have to delete that now. Because what's going to happen is we're going to be like, we're going to get a bunch of comments where you guys were supposed to do a part 2. And we're like, what were we supposed to cover in the part 2, though?
Exactly. Boom. You tell us.
Damn. All right, guys. Have a good night.
Yep.
Bye.
Take it easy.